Today's top three weather stories are winter storms, the stratospheric polar vortex, and severe weather, and we're going to be going over all three of them in today's weather forecast. Welcome back, everyone, to Weather on the Go, all your weather coverage. My name is Hunter. If you are new to the channel, subscribe, follow along with all my detailed, accurate weather breakdowns on this channel. Like the video, give it a thumbs up, and share this video with friends, family, and on social media. I definitely appreciate it. Let's get into the short-term portion of the forecast. Let's look at our temperatures for highs this afternoon. Look at our warmth that we're seeing across the desert Southwest and Arizona, southern portions of California, even over into New Mexico. Temperatures well into the 70s and even the 80s this afternoon. Where we look to the north, it's much colder into Montana, up here into Wyoming, Idaho, Washington State, and Oregon. A lot of these temperatures are more wintry-like and colder further to the north. Looking at the central U.S., a very tight temperature gradient is in place here. Look at the Dakotas up here into Minnesota. We're into the single digits. These are highs this afternoon. You look at the wind chills up here into the Dakotas, especially northern North Dakota. We're going to see wind chills 20, 30 degrees below zero this afternoon. But looking at our air temperatures across Texas, we could be taking a run at 90 degrees in parts of North and Northwest Texas this afternoon. 80s all the way up into Southwest Kansas and Oklahoma, and 70s getting all the way up into central Illinois, into central Missouri, and even into portions of Indiana this afternoon. Looking at the east, we got colder air to the north. Nice reprieve of temperatures up here into Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, and upstate New York, 20s and 30s. That is a nice warm-up compared to where we've been in the single digits and teens the last few days. Nice warm-up there. In the Ohio Valley, seeing the 60-degree line going up into Ohio, into portions there of Kentucky, West Virginia, and Virginia, and then 70s, even some 80s down here across the southeast, especially Florida, as we go through the afternoon. Let's look here at our temperatures going through the rest of this week. So this is today through Saturday, February 8th. Notice across the south, we're seeing warmer temperatures here. Up to the north, the colder air bottled up across southern Canada and the far northern tier of the United States, like the Dakotas, Montana, and portions of Minnesota. Some of that cold air at times taking a run at northern Nebraska as well. And precipitation anomalies this week going to be very active. Look at the blue here on the map across northern California, stretching into Oregon and Idaho. We're going to see some well above normal precipitation, and then that will transfer downstream eastward into the northern plains, the upper Midwest, and into the Ohio Valley, and that could translate to some winter storm and even ice storm potential. So let's first look at the Pineapple Express. This continues to bring a lot of headlines to the weather community as we have a lot of moisture with rain and snow moving in across the west, and notice as we go through today into tonight, we're going to continue to see that in Northern California. Higher elevation snow, lower elevation rain. Going in through the day on Tuesday, that will slowly migrate a little bit further south into central California. And then as we go into Wednesday, taking a run at Southern California. Now, with that said, significant drought is feeding back here in Southern California, so that could eat away at the precip shield, but we could have some moisture into places like Santa Barbara, into the Los Angeles area, and even San Bernardino as we go into the middle of the week. And then a new storm system will bring more moisture into especially Northern California and parts of the foothills here as we go into Thursday the 6th and Friday the 7th, and finally by next week, we're going to be turning off the taps, at least for now, for the moisture out west. How much additional rainfall accumulation could we be seeing here? Still the potential for double-digit rainfall totals up to 12 inches locally here in Northern California, with a widespread 6 to 10 inches. And looking at more moisture spreading inland, a lot of that will be in the form of snow. The Sierra is going to get crushed with heavy snow, several feet here, and then a couple feet of snow up here into Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, several inches into Utah around Salt Lake City, and into Colorado there. Northern Nevada going to see a few to several inches of snow there as well. So the watershed out west, the ski resorts, definitely loving all the snow out there through the week. Let's talk about the central and eastern U.S. because we have an interesting storm by the middle of the week, which could bring an ice storm to places like the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and the Great Lakes, even over toward the northeast. So here we go today. Got some light snow showers across Minnesota, the Dakotas, and Wisconsin. And also over here into northern lower Michigan. Going into Tuesday, we see that kind of dwindle, maybe a few snow flurries in and around the Great Lakes. Warm air advection pumping in from the south, southerly flow from the Gulf inland here into the southern plains will be warming our temperatures up. And then as we go into Wednesday, I want you to take note of the pink here that is starting to emerge on the European model across southern Iowa, northern Missouri, and west central Illinois. This is freezing rain and sleet. And as we go into Wednesday afternoon, that will continue to advect north and eastward into places like Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, the Davenport Quad Cities, Rockford, maybe even as far north as Janesville here and over towards Chicago. Something to keep an eye on. Rainfall further south, snowfall further north, and a prolonged period of potentially some stronger freezing rain here for places like Chicago, Rockford, Milwaukee, over here to Grand Rapids, Fort Wayne, Toledo, and Dayton, Ohio. Something to keep an eye on there. The further north extent of the freezing rain is uncertain, the further south extent as well, but there is a pretty good signal here of an ice storm, and then a little bit more snow there for northern Minnesota and Wisconsin. Ice storm threat shifts over into Pennsylvania, western New York State as we go into Thursday. And then maybe some cold air damming down here into Maryland, and then that will move across the Northeast with a mixture of precipitation of snow, sleet, freezing rain, and all rain, and even some severe weather we got to keep an eye on the southern side going in through the Friday time frame. So what are we looking at for precipitation and their types? Right now, looking at rainfall, we're looking at some heavy rain in the Ohio Valley, upwards of an inch. That could lead to some isolated flash flooding, and severe weather may be possible down here toward Kentucky, southern Indiana, southern Ohio, and West Virginia, even as far south as Tennessee. That we'll have to be keeping an eye on the severe weather potential. Looking at snowfall now, colder air to the north, Dakotas, especially North Dakota, northern Minnesota, and northern Wisconsin, Michigan, especially the upper peninsula, and then over here into Quebec, Ontario, and then the upper portion of the Northeast here into Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, upstate New York, going to be seeing a few inches of snow with this system. The more kind of interesting aspect to this storm could be the ice. We could be seeing some significant icing across places like Des Moines, Rockford, Davenport, into portions there of Chicago, Milwaukee, Grand Rapids, all the way over to Detroit there, Fort Wayne, Toledo, Dayton, all the way to Columbus, Akron. We'll be keeping a very close eye on this as we go into the middle of the week. Some of these areas here could be seeing over 1/10 of an inch of ice, maybe a quarter, maybe locally a 1/2 an inch of ice. So that could cause some not only travel problems, but also problems with the power as well. Now let's look here at the Northeast, seeing still a signal at least a few hundredths to a couple tenths of an inch of ice, maybe locally a quarter of an inch of ice there into central PA. So that is something we'll keep an eye on as we go through late this week. Now heading into the weekend, we're going to see that temperature gradient sharpen even further. Colder air dropping a little bit further to the south and warmer air fighting that ridge across the east. And looking at the jet stream, this is like the highway, if you will, for low pressure systems. It's going to follow that kind of highway, the stronger winds in the jet stream. And notice that's up here into the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and the Great Lakes. That's where our next storm system will be. And notice by the weekend on Saturday the 8th, Saturday morning, it's a similar track to what we're having this week, Wednesday, Thursday, and into Friday. And you can see snow to the north, an ice storm threat in similar areas, Des Moines to Chicago, over toward Fort Wayne and Toledo, and then rain and severe weather potential here again for Super Bowl Sunday from the Ohio Valley eastward and into the southeast. Something to keep an eye on there. Now let's talk about the stratosphere here just for a moment. The sudden stratospheric warming event is definitely a possibility as we go into the middle of February. The Stratospheric Polar Vortex has not been in the picture this winter whatsoever. We've been dealing with the Tropospheric Polar Vortex and really just the cold air damming across the southern United States. And looking here at the stratosphere, the polar vortex right now currently is strong. So when it's strong, the colder air is bottled up to the north. It's locked up there in northern Canada and the Arctic where it belongs. Now watch as we go into the middle of this week. It starts to stretch here. This is what you call a stratospheric polar vortex stretch. And you can see there's clearly two lobes here. The strongest lobe, at least on the European model, is over here into portions of northern Hudson Bay, up into Greenland there, as well as northern Canada. And that is interesting because as we go in toward the following week, we start to see it stretch even more. And then by the middle of February, a displacement or a split here in the polar vortex. And you have warming over Alaska, warming over here as well to the east, up towards Scandinavia. And that could actually lead to a sudden stratospheric warming event, and this is in the stratosphere. So there's going to be a lag time by about 1 to 2 weeks for this cold air to reach where we live in the troposphere. So as we go into that second week of February, we're going to start to see the result of that colder air, but not quite the, the stratospheric warming event type of cold air that we were just talking about. This is the cold air previously. This is going to be pushing further to the south towards Texas and the Ohio Valley, squashing that ridge. And looking at the highway for storms here into the second week of February, notice it's a little bit further to the south from Texas up through the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. Looking here at the ensemble guidance for precipitation anomalies, very wet across the southeast, and I imagine this is going to be a lot of heavy rain as that temperature gradient type starts to sharpen across that area. So looking at Monday, February 10th, notice we're pretty dry here, and then as we go into Tuesday, the European model may bring a pretty substantial winter storm somewhere across the central and the eastern U.S., and then followed by potentially another storm or two behind that, taking us all the way through the 15th of February. The GFS, the American guidance, very similar. It has a snowstorm maybe just a little bit further north than the European model shows, but just a train of snow moving across the central and the eastern U.S. Again, the placement, the intensity, how much moisture it has to work with is all still in the air right now. And that is something we're going to refine in future forecasts. Now, looking at the ensemble guidance, when you're looking at something 7, 10, even 15 days out, you're looking at ensemble guidance and seeing where their potential errors are in the individual models. So it kind of averages them out. Notice across portions of Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, even as far south here as Tennessee, North Carolina, we have the chance for some substantial snow as we go into the second week of February as that colder air comes south, and a big signal here in the mid-Atlantic and Northeast for a bigger snowstorm. And that is actually very consistent here among the ensemble guidance when you look at the GFS, the American ensemble. So very interesting. And then as we go into the third week of February, the 15th through the 22nd, that's when the sudden stratospheric warming event could actually lead to some even colder air and much more widespread air that is cold across the central and eastern U.S. here. And this could be similar to what we had in January. So that is something to keep an eye on as we go into the long term. Thank you for watching. We're going to continue to track the Pineapple Express with all the moisture, rain and snow out west, multiple winter storms, and the polar vortex with the potential for a sudden stratospheric warming event into the middle of February. We got you covered here, so make sure to subscribe to the channel, follow along with all my detailed, accurate weather breakdowns, and post notifications. Turn them on so you have my video as we have another one coming out this evening. Also, like the video, give it a thumbs up, and share this video with friends, family, and on social media, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their Monday out there.